I'm gonna level with you all. I had this idea that I would have this little snarky little intro of being stuck in the queue for Diablo 4. It had to go and have no queue today. So I'm just here. And now I have to ask myself, do I want to make this video or go play Diablo 4? Diablo 4 recently had their closed beta. And in that closed beta, I put in a lot of hours to try and just get an idea, get a feel for what the game was. And this will be my first impressions of Diablo 4 based off of this beta. But the reason why I want to start the video by highlighting the fact that there was a queue for Diablo 4 and now there no longer really is much of a queue, or if it is, it's much more in control. And even the things like disconnects seem to be less than they were yesterday, is that it shows that while yesterday was kind of a dumpster fire in a lot of ways, they have been improving and working and iterating in exactly the way that you would hope they would in a beta. But there were other issues, and some of those issues were still present even today after I played for quite some time. A lot of those issues were things like lag, lots and lots of lag. It wasn't throughout the entire game, and most of the lag was actually in places like the cinematics and stuff like that. But I kept running into this hitching problem. I also experienced a lot of lag when I did some world events and different kinds of things like that. It was mostly just like frame drops here and there, but of course there were the disconnects. And I did it really late at night on purpose. No! No! Shit! Oh, poop. And when the queues were bad, that was quite the struggle, as you would disconnect and then go forward into a 100-minute to 50-minute queue. For me, I actually had to end the stream I did here on this channel because I disconnected and there was no way I was going to sit and try and entertain everybody for an hour and a half while it tried to reconnect. I don't think that I am that funny or entertaining to be able to entertain you for that long. But now that we've kind of addressed some of those launch day issues, let's get into the actual game itself and why I am excited for Diablo 4 and why I've struggled to put down this game. Let's start with the part of Diablo 4 that I was really surprised with, pleasantly surprised with, and that's the world itself. The world feels big and pretty open, all things considered. It is still an ARPG, and you still have defined paths that you want to go to. This is not an open world game by any means, but it still feels open for an ARPG. I got kind of the opposite feeling that I had when I played Path of Exile. In Path of Exile, it just felt very confined. Same with Diablo 3, not so much here. While you run around going from one quest to the next, there's rewards for exploring, be it gold, fights with creatures, events, dungeons, side quests, all found in the middle of nowhere, cliffs to climb or ruins to duck under. Essentially, you're incentivized to treat the world more like an MMORPG. It makes you want to go and explore and see what hidden treasures and troubles you find. Or hidden horrors. This is a Diablo game after all, and the tone is dark. And the world itself, it's literally dark, adding a bit to that atmosphere. I won't spoil it, but there's a scene early on that really sets the grim setting. This is the reaction I had as I was experiencing that cinematic scene for the very first time. As you can tell, there's a lot going on in this game. You are sucked in very quickly to the story, and while I know there are many players of Diablo 4 who see the story as secondary to the gameplay and grinding, to me it's always been an incredibly important part, and so far I'm pretty hooked. I want to see where the story goes. The main story is engaging, but more than that, the characters are intriguing and unique.
Then at least have the decency to join me for supper. I'm bloody hungry.
And many of them have deep gravelly voices that'll make you tingle from your head to your toes, and that's something that I will probably regret ever recording and putting in a video. It also makes me wonder if my voice is insanely high pitched in comparison. The team has done a great job in making the world feel alive and interesting, and it was honestly very difficult to put down. There's a sense of excitement exploring as well as some dread in the darkness. The field of view narrows and close, and enemies can kind of just appear at times. Usually in larger and larger numbers, and almost at times overwhelming numbers. I found the most haunting areas to be out in the open world in the snow, especially during the snowstorms at night. Even more so than in the dungeons, which felt more like a game. Speaking of the game though, we gotta talk about the gameplay. Combat has weight to it. Every attack feels impactful. Once I got Whirlwind on my Barbarian, I really couldn't wait to use it. I also noticed I was naturally sliding into different playstyles with each class I played. As a sorcerer, I made use of my ranged abilities, especially on the first boss fight, while as a barbarian, I was more up in the face of giant hordes of enemies, gathering them together with a taunt and then unleashing different skills, or shifting to a bleed build that made use of dots and more mobility. Essentially, it didn't feel quite as spammy as some ARPGs I've played, and instead it just felt fun and right. I actually wanted to engage in combat in this game. And Diablo is known for cutting down hordes of enemies, and that certainly applies, but individual enemies pose challenges as well, and at times you can definitely feel overwhelmed. I played on the hardest difficulty available in beta, and it felt just about right. There were definitely times when I was legitimately worried for my health, and many other times when I just straight up died, solo or in a group. I was not brave enough to try the hardcore mode, but perhaps I should in the future, because that alone would be quite the challenge. But there's another part that I want to talk about with Diablo IV that kind of sets it aside from some other ARPGs, and that's the social aspect. Diablo IV so far feels a bit like an MMO-lite, which I suppose is essentially what it is. There are people in the world events, clans, you can group up with up to 4 players online. I had a lot of fun just chatting with people as we waited for a world event that was actually delayed, while they showed off their flashy skills like this, coiling Fire Snake, which is kind of just badass. Made me feel confident that we would, defeat the world boss. The co-op for me is where it really shines though. Being able to engage with a game and play with friends is seamless. It just shifts you into their campaign if they're advanced further than you. So while you won't be able to advance the main campaign, you can still do plenty of other things together. Like going through dungeons, doing side quests, all kinds of things like that. And one of the great things is that loot is shared. So all the loot that you get, they will get as well. And it tends to be for your class. The only thing that I notice is not shared at all is when you get a legendary item. Legendary items seem to be personal and kind of random. The social part of this game is its own thing where you feel engaged, and for some reason the thing that it made me think of is Diablo 2, where I have specific memories of logging into Diablo 2 and just being amazed at some of the incredible gear that people had. I got a similar experience here in the beta. I got to play with friends though, and that made it so much better. Now I will say that playing with friends did pull me out of the story a little bit, but it provided a different kind of joy and excitement. So I think that what I might recommend for anyone that is interested in the story, play through the story by yourself first and then go play with your friends, because it's an entirely different experience where it's a bit more like a dungeon crawler and you get to have fun and you get to communicate and try and take down bosses, and the bosses are actually kind of difficult and communicating is important. But there's one thing we have to end with, and that's the world events. Because I got to try the world events that were available in the closed beta, and it was an experience of its own. Ashava was the world boss in the beta, a level 25 poisonous beast that looks like a freaking kaiju. These events are fun and exhilarating and a little daunting. They have the feel of raids in a normal MMO, and I can see them being a lot of fun. This massive creature just kind of crawled out of the primordial ooze and went to town, devouring and destroying us all. This level 25 world boss was one-shotting not just me at level 10 and then later level 16, but also full level 25s. As we wailed on its massive health pool, it essentially became a res Zergfest, as it often would end up killing whoever was trying to res other players. I spent most of the time throwing as many buffs out as I could while wailing on its legs. Sometimes I would last for a few minutes, while other times I would last just for a couple seconds, Why did I have to phrase it that way? Basically, there's times when I was fighting it for a long time and times where I died to a AoE attack early. As you progress with the boss fight, it even changed up its skills at different points. There was one particular skill where it kind of changed what used to be a safe area to attack the boss into no longer a safe area, and you would notice that most people didn't know that that was going to happen because we'd all end up dead. The fight felt epic, and I couldn't help but just wish that our first and second attempts that we just had more people. I can imagine these sort of world bosses being incredibly fun for clans, as they have the sort of raid mechanics you'd expect, and having some kind of communication and perhaps some people like dedicated rezzers or things like that to really focus on getting it so that you don't have to take all that damage from deaths is probably a good way to go about this fight. And keep in mind, this boss was only level 25, and it is only one of the world events. As long as D4 keeps these world bosses worthwhile to attempt, and you can gather people to go fight them, they should remain interesting. It is a mechanic that is, however, going to be dependent on a healthy population in the game. So what are my final thoughts on Diablo 4? Well, it has very engaging story. It is a very dark and engrossing world that makes you want to figure out what's going on. It has characters that are interesting and you want to learn more about their stories. And the combat is absolutely wonderful. If you enjoy ARPGs, you will enjoy this game. If you're looking for slower paced combat, this will not be the game for you. But if you're looking at Diablo 4, you're probably not looking for that slow paced combat. Now, I personally have a joy for multiple types of combat, and I can see where this combat has its place. There is definitely a sense of joy and excitement in just utterly destroying things and seeing the numbers go up. You'll also get tons of little dopamine hits all throughout as you upgrade your equipment, as you upgrade your skills, as you level up. There's a lot of ways that Diablo 4 is going to reward you for how it goes. Down to the negatives. This game is, in some ways, still pretty buggy. There's a lot of lag. There's a lot of times when I was disconnected. There are still at times queues, and really the items will eventually have kind of diminishing returns, as any ARPG that goes this way does. You will stop getting upgrades all the time, and you'll start having to hunt for that one item, that one legendary item. The dopamine hits will be coming a little bit further and further apart, but that's kind of how these games work. So in conclusion, it's a good game, and I would recommend it if you enjoyed Diablo 2, I think you'll enjoy this game. If you enjoyed Diablo 3, you'll probably still enjoy this one. If you liked other great ARPGs, I still think you'll enjoy this as well. Just keep in mind that it is a very dark tone, and yeah, safe to say there's really only one more thing that could ruin Diablo 4, and I think we all know what that thing is.